Good morning, everyone. How are you this morning? Okay, what I decided to do today is we're going to divide up the lessons so that we're going to have three parts. And the first part will be math, and I'll do a second video that will be language arts, and then the third one will be science. That'll make it a little bit easier for you to be able to stop and look at things. So let's get started. We're going to be working on our e-learning lessons today for Thursday, March 26th, and this is our math lesson. It's lesson 107, which is writing mixed numbers as decimals. So let's take a look, please, on page 368. Okay, on page 368, you'll see our figures like this. You have three large squares. Each of these squares are divided up into 10 parts. Okay, every time you see the horizontal lines like this dividing up the squares, you'll know automatically that it's been divided up into 10 parts. And so this is what it looks like. You have the two squares that are completely shaded in, and then you have the one square where you have only three of the bars shaded in. And so when you were going to be writing a mixed number for this, you would have written I'll put it down here for right now. You have two whole squares, and then you have 3/10 of another square. Now, I want to back up a little bit and go back to just simply writing decimals for a minute. When we were working on the decimals, when you had, for example, 6/10, remember that you wrote that as 0.6. Remember that when it's tenths, it's one place to the right of the decimal point. And then when you had hundredths, as in 6/100ths, you wrote that as 0.06. Remember that the number 100 has two zeros, and therefore after the decimal point there are two places. So again, just make sure you're familiar with the writing of 6/10 and 6/100 and how that looks. Again, 6/10, one place to the right of the decimal point, whereas 6/100 you have the two places to the right of the decimal point. Remember I told you when we were learning just how to write these decimals that the zero told us that we had no whole numbers. Okay, so when there were no whole numbers, we had a zero. Okay, now getting back to today where we have two whole squares and 3/10 of another, we have that mixed number where you have a whole number and a fraction. And so when you write that as a decimal, you're going to keep your whole number that stays to the left of the decimal point, okay? And then your decimal point, and then 3/10, okay, you're just going to have the one digit 3. Because again, since it's tenths, it's only one place to the right of the decimal point. But because you do have a whole number, you now have that number to the left of the decimal, and then your tenths is to the right of the decimal point. So the example that they show you in your book, you have 2 and 3/10. Now, a little bit further down on that page, you have another example, and I'm not going to draw that quite the way it is because it has so many little squares in it. But you do have one whole square completely shaded in, and then you have the second square. And the second square, or actually both squares, are divided up into 100 little squares. And that's why I'm not going to take the time to draw all of that out for you. You can see that in your book. But when you see all of those little squares, you know that it's going to be hundreds. You don't need to take the time to count them, but you will know that there are 100 of them. Okay, so in your book it shows you the one whole square completely shaded in, and then if you look on the second square, you'll see that there are 33 little squares shaded in. Now again, because they are divided up into lots of 100 little squares. Okay, let's see, what do we have here? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so just roughly to give you an idea, each horizontal line has 10 little squares in it. So again, you can see in that second one that you have 3 whole rows shaded in, and then 3 little squares. So altogether you had 33 little squares that were shaded in. So if you have one whole large square shaded in and you have 33 out of 100 small squares shaded in, this is what it would look like as a mixed number, 1 and 33 hundredths. And then to write that as a decimal, it's 1, your decimal point, 1 and 33 hundredths. Again, remember that with hundredths, you have 2 places to the right of the decimal point. Okay, so let's take a look at our practice. Okay, and let's go through the practice together. So the first one asks you to write the number of shaded squares as a mixed number. Okay, so that's A. So take a look at that figure. What do you think that would look like as a mixed number? Now, at this point, you have to also remember that they're going to be asking you sometimes to write as a mixed number and other times as a decimal. So you need to pay attention to what it is that they want you to do. So in A, we're looking at the mixed number that goes along with that picture. Think about it. You have one whole square completely shaded in, so there's your one whole one. Then your decimal point would come next, because remember your whole numbers are to the left of the decimal point. And then in the second square, you have 1 out of 10 parts shaded in. Oh, sorry, let's fix this. Sorry, this one asked you for the mixed number. So you had the one whole square, and then you had 1 out of 10 parts shaded in. So as a mixed number, that's 1 and 1/10. Now it's in B where they ask you now to write it as the decimal. So again, you have 1 and 1/10, so your whole number 1 to the left of the decimal point. Your decimal point, since it's tenths, there's only one place to the right of the decimal point, so it's 1/10. So 1 and 1/10. Okay, again, just to remind you that when writing your decimals, or actually when reading your decimals, you can read it as 1 and 1/10, and other times we can just simply say it's 1.1. But you need to understand what that 1.1 means. It's 1 and 1/10. It's the same as this. Okay? So that's A and B. That goes along with the illustration that was given. Then for C, D, and E, they ask you to write each mixed number as a decimal number. So we have 9 and, 9 and 99 hundredths. And you have 12 and 3/10. And 10 and 100. Oops, that didn't come out so well. Let's fix that. Okay, so each of these we need to write as a decimal. They're written as mixed numbers. We need to write them as a decimal. Okay, so the first one, you have 9 and 99 hundredths. Again, your whole number, 9, followed by your decimal point. And then since this is hundredths, you know right away you're going to have 2 places to the right of the decimal. It's 99 hundredths, so it's nice and easy because you have that double digit number. So 9 and 99 hundredths. Then we have 12 and 3/10. So you have your whole number 12, your decimal point, and then your 3/10, 1 place to the right of the decimal point. Okay, and then that last one was 10 and 1/100th, correct? Yes. Okay, so 10 and 100th. So again, your whole number 10, even though 10 is a 2-digit number, it doesn't matter if it's a 2-digit number or a 3-digit number, that whole number still gets written to the left of the decimal point. So you have 10 and then it's 1/100th. So now this is where you have to remember that when it's 100 or it's hundredths, that you have 2 places to the right of the decimal. So now it's 10 and 100th. So if you put your 1 here, okay, what's going to happen? You would put a 0 here and you'd end up with 10, and that's not what we have. We don't have 10 hundredths, we have 100ths. Remember that another way that you can write the number 1 would be with the 0 before it. Okay, 0, 1. So you have 10 and 1/100ths. Again, hundredths 2 places to the right of the decimal point. Okay, and then the last section you have F, G, and H. Okay, so we have 60.3, 6.03, and 5.67. Okay, so these are written as decimals, and you now need to write them as mixed numbers. Okay, so here you have 60.3, okay, or we say 60 and 3/10. So your 60 is your whole number, because anything to the left of the decimal point is the whole number, and 3/10. You know it's tenths because there's only one digit to the right of the decimal point. So 60 and 3/10. Next one we have 6.03. Well, 03 is the same as 3. 6 is your whole number. 6. Your decimal point would be your and. That's where you're going to say and. So you have 6 and. And then look at this. You have 2 places to the right of the decimal. So 2 places to the right of the decimal then tells you that you have hundredths. And then this is 3/100. So 6 and 3/100. Written as a mixed number, 6 and 3/100. Okay, and then the third one is 5.67, or we say 5 and 67/100. So 5 is your whole number, okay, 67, and again, it's 2 places to the right of the decimal point, making it hundredths. Okay, 5 and 67/100. Okay? All right, so then for today, independently, you will work on this lesson 107. You're going to complete all of the lesson. So that's going from numbers 1 to 27. You complete all of them. Again, you should be spending about a half hour on your work. Work carefully. Remember, your goal is to get the most number correct, not to see how fast you can get it done. So work carefully and neatly. And in addition to completing those 27 problems, again, you need to be spending about 20 minutes on your math practice, whether that's extra math or IXL. Those of you still working in extra math, you can be spending other time throughout the day working on extra math as well, because your goal is to get out of extra math and move into IXL. You've got to get those facts mastered. Okay, so again, make sure you're spending a good amount of time looking over your work, working carefully, and if you have any questions, please let me know and I'll help you out. Talk to you later.